All right. Hi, friends. Welcome to Manhattan. We're happy to have you guys. So welcome back to K-State. How many previous grads from K-State do we have in the room? Oh, welcome back to K-State, the Manhappiness and the land of purple. So I was asked to give a little bit of an update on our undergraduate programs. We do a pretty good job here highlighting our graduate student programs. You all know that they're the ones that do all of the work. We just get to take the credit for it on a day like today. And so we wanted to share some of the trends and what we're seeing at the undergrad population, because we know that that's also a significant component of your workforce. And so what are things that we're approaching, and what are some of the things that we're looking at as we look toward the future? And then likewise, at the very end, I'll be asking a question of you. So as you look at our enrollment, it very much follows what the Kansas high school enrollment is doing right now. And so as we have fewer and fewer students graduating from high school and the Kansas demographics go down, our enrollment starts to go down a little bit. But what we're excited about is we've actually returned that trend over, and we have more students, more new students this past year than what we've had in many, many years. And as we look at the demographics of those students, boy, a big chunk of them are from out of state. And so it's something that as we look at our growing workforce in the agriculture and the demand for agriculture jobs and people to work those jobs in the state, we are probably going to have to pull more, North Dakotans and Pennsylvania or Massachusetts and South Dakotans in from out of state and help us fill some of those jobs that exist in the state, as well as really do a great job of training our in-state students. I also wanted to point out this bottom component down here, and this dark purple bar would be our online enrollment. And so that's very different. This is backwards, sorry. So the online enrollment here is the purple one, that dark purple. Our online enrollment is growing massively, and that's really a post-COVID component. So we had this big group of students that went online during COVID, and we kind of expected them to come back to campus, and in some ways many of them did, but that allowed us at the time to launch several new programs. So all of our degree programs now in animal science are available online, and that is really a high demand area. What's interesting about it, though, is the average student is 45 years old. The average undergraduate student in our online programs. And so this is not, the 18 to 22-year-olds still want to come and hang out with you in Aggieville, right? They still want to come to Manhattan and have the Manhattan experience. But because of other situations, those individuals that were never able to finish a degree are able to come back through an online portion now. And that's an opportunity that, as we look at continuing education for some of your employers and some of your employees, whether it's to complete a degree or even just maybe a standalone course or some certificate programs, it's definitely an area that we're seeing demand in. And so we're also interested to see what that looks like and how we can imagine that to continue to service people where they're at in the state if we're not able to educate them here in Manhattan all the time. All of that said, we still continue to be the largest major on campus, and not by a little bit, by a lot of bit. We had Board of Regents in Weber Hall today, and I did not neglect to mention that, right? So I think it's a message we need to continue to share. And I think that it's also important here in Kansas, right? As we look at the other significant enrollment institutions of animal science programs, they're within their institutions relatively small. And so we continue to be the largest major on campus. It's normal to be an animal science major at Kansas State University, and I think that that's very special as someone who came from an out-of-state institution. And as you look at, again, our makeup of in-state versus out-of-state students, that's one where we want to continue to be the premier destination for our in-state students and provide opportunities, and I'll share some of those with you today. But we also, because of some of the abilities and facilities we've been able to maintain here, thanks to your support, we've been able to also attract students from out of state. I spoke at Profitability Conference this year, and I got more questions on this slide than I think any presentation that I'd ever given in my life. And I did some of the first phytase work, right? And we work on African swine fever virus, and this is the one that I think has probably generated the most interest. So this would be our female to male population and the distribution. These are not reversed, all right? This is where we're standing today. So our fall 22 students in the Department of Animal Sciences at K-State, 78% female, 22% male. And so I routinely have conversations with swine industry, and they're like, no offense, Cassie, but where are all the gentlemen at, right? Not coming to school. And so there are huge demands for technical degrees, for students that are in different fields, and those are very male-dominant fields. More and more, we're seeing a growing population of young women coming in, and you'll see that across our graduate programs. You see that starting to make its wave through some of the early employment. And so I want us to all get pretty comfortable with girls being in places more than just the sow farm. Right? Because this is a place where we're going to start to see more and more young women being incorporated into varying levels of the swine industry. This is the other piece that sometimes surprises people. This is some of our baseline data from our undergraduate research program when we were working on trying to establish, how much knowledge do these students come in? So as we look at it, on average, 4% of our students who chose to enroll in an elective class that involved weighing pigs on a Friday morning in Manhattan, so they chose to enroll in this class, only 4% of those students had ever seen pigs in a commercial situation, right? 30% had ever touched a pig. And so again, as we look at who is coming into the animal science program, and we believe that based on the job, and I'll talk about career demand and job demands and placement data, but this is our student population as we look at it today. I certainly spend time going to Southwest Kansas and recruiting, I'm from Wabaunsee County, recruiting the good ag kids, and that continues to be a high priority for us. There's just not enough of them. And so 2 weeks ago, I was at Johnson County Community College. Yesterday, I was at Olathe North at their Animal Health Academy. And I'm talking about the swine industry, and I'm talking about the jobs and the technology and the innovation that we have within this industry. But it's different than maybe the student demographic information or student demographics from even 10 years ago or longer, like when I was in school. And so that's one of our big challenges. This is something that we take pretty seriously, and to be honest, it's one of the reasons that I've shifted into a heavier teaching role, is to help develop this pipeline earlier on. That's a stage where I thought I could maybe help make an impact. And so we started surveying our incoming freshmen as part of some of the, what are you interested in? What types of experience do you want to have here? And so we started with the group of, we have our May graduating seniors. So for one of the first times I have data that when we started collecting it, I had a full class that had been represented. And so I'll get to this point of where that May 2022 grad is. All right, but as we look at this, those freshmen coming in the fall of 2018, we said, how many of you think that you might like a career dealing with pigs someday or working in the swine industry? That was 2% of our incoming students. I'd argue that that's probably a smaller number today than what it was even then. All right, so then how do we get the number of students and how can we help them recognize the jobs and the innovation and the technology that I've been talking about? So as we look at where those students have gone, all right, this past year's graduating class, 4% of them, and I have down here, we had 314 total students of that graduating class. We had a big graduating class. All right, so we placed more than double what we had expected, right? That had even indicated that they really knew what a pig was at that point, directly into production or pork processing roles. So they were going directly into production. 20% were accepted roles or jobs in what I call adjacent industries, but still very specific adjacent industries with the swine industry. These are not, nutrition companies selling cattle supplements. This would be the component of the nutrition industry or the laboratory industry, like our diagnostic laboratory, or nutrition companies, many of whom are some of you guys in the room that work with swine producers and have a funnel somehow into the pork production system. And then another 29% were accepted either to veterinary or graduate school swine programs. And again, when I say graduate school, that means they're either pursuing their master's degree or their PhD in something like swine nutrition, right? Or they've gone from saying, oh, I'm going to be a small animal veterinarian, to one recognizing that they're probably at least going to have pigs in their practice. And so they're pre-vet and they're going into vet school with the intent of practicing on pigs. And so as we look at how do we address the veterinary shortage, how do we help fuel some of this, we're actively always working on what types of things can we be doing in undergraduate research, how can we work with you to get the best student interns, how do we get the best kids in Kansas to come to K-State and then go back and work for you, and likewise, how can we recruit talent when we don't have enough in-state students so that we can find students to work in our Kansas pork industry as well. So now we went from 2% to about 53% of our graduating class recognize that right away their job is going to have something to do with the swine industry. I'm going to work on growing that. We'll see where we go. And then this is kind of our classic demographic information and placement information, what those students look like. Again, we're the largest major on campus, but I like to tell our story that we're pretty good at placing students too. You all help us do that, and many times our swine industry salary, our starting salary for the swine industry is quite a bit higher than what that might be. But we're still sitting somewhere between 3 to 5% or 3 to 5,000 higher than most of our competitors, than our sister institutions on starting salary. As we look at where those students went, that 97% placement rate, 60% took jobs right away, but 37% went on to either graduate or veterinary school. And that number, I've checked it about 15 times because it was kind of shocking to me when it started really growing through that. But we've placed more students in veterinary schools of some states than they took from their own states now. And so we have students, a lot of that out-of-state student population are students coming because of the rigor of the institution and the classwork, and to be honest, the hands-on opportunities. As we look at our ability to get students into a commercial sow farm, or as commercial of a sow farm as we can imagine on an institution that's doing research, that's something that's really important for us. And so as we look at the types of students we're pulling in, and then where those students ultimately go and how they impact our industry, those facilities, the nurseries, the sow farms, the things that you've helped us invest in continue to be a pivotal role for that and have helped us draw talent into the area. Here are our major employers over the past, in that graduating class, based on some of those swine-specific roles. You may be surprised by some of them. We had a fair number that are starting to go regulatory. And so we had 2 students start with the Department of Defense. We have several that started with FDA, Kansas Department of Ag, and then of course our historic production and processing partners, as well as kind of the nutrition and support industries. And so when we're sharing with students why they should come to K-State, or why K-State Animal Science as opposed to other programs, we always like to talk about our facilities and our faculty, where we can provide that hands-on learning. This was in one of our nurseries, one of our undergrad research classes, where actually Bo is the best bleeder that I think, the best person to teach bleeding probably that we've ever had. So I'm kind of sad that we're letting him graduate at some time, but he's really good at helping teach undergraduates how to collect blood samples. All right, but it's also where we can give students part-time job opportunities and do that type of undergraduate research. Those facilities are really the linchpin to keeping us relevant. And then on the faculty side, we've maintained our ability to have faculty like Dr. Goodband that can do high-level research, but are also teaching. And I can't tell you how important that is. More and more at an institution, we're drawn to be in specific silos. You teach, or you do research, or you do maybe research and extension. And I'm so proud of the group that we have, and really as we have our president and our deans, we're working in a situation and in a institution that very much supports the land-grant mission and believes that we should be putting some of our strongest researchers in the classrooms, and some of our strongest teachers can be presenting to Swine Day components, and it's important that we have all parts of those within our land-grant system. A little bit on scholarships, because that is something that's changing. And I know some of you have high schoolers at home that may be in your family or neighbor kids that you've worked with. One of the things that we're really working on to keep our in-state students, making it able for them to come to K-State and feasible and economical, is our new president launched a scholarship program called the Land Grant Promise. And it's specifically targeted to our Pell eligible students those students who have historically been eligible for Pell Grants, that's an average salary or household income of less than $60,000. Historically, those Pell Grants have covered full tuition, but as tuition has gone up, the rest of what they've had to come up with has gone up as well. The Pell Grant amount has not. And so the land grant promise basically makes up for that other 1/3 of that tuition. They originally launched this program to come up with the other 1/3 so that any Pell eligible student, and they started with this kind of surrounding area around Manhattan, in these surrounding counties, that the land grant promise would kick in along with their Pell Grant to make it, to basically offset the cost of tuition for 15 credits each semester. Yesterday, our Board of Regents approved another $5 million into this program to launch it and make it and expand it across the state. And so again, as we look at some of the people that we really need in the swine industry, we need to make it competitive and feasible for them to be able to come and access education. And so we're really proud of that Land Grant Promise program and the ability to hopefully service some of those students that historically, over the past few years, have not been able to access education here. The other place that we have are for non-need-based scholarships. We've just made it a heck of a lot easier. I couldn't even navigate the scholarship process, right? And so we've made it where we have a pretty straightforward process based on GPA or ACT score for in-state versus transfer students. And as long as you're maintaining a specific GPA, those are renewable scholarships. And so it's really helpful from the university perspective that we're starting to have transparency around the scholarship model. But my question for you, and Wayne, do you know how to work QR codes? No? Okay, so take out your camera, all right? Try to take a picture of it, but don't take a picture of it. Just hold your camera over the QR code and like a little yellow box comes up. I want all of you to do this right now, please. Oh, you're like students, good job. I should have brought candy, because people do this if I bring candy, okay? So one of the things that, as we're trying to figure out how can we bring more students into the swine industry, and you saw some of them today, right? We want to connect our on-campus students with the opportunities and the people that are in our industry. But we have an increasingly hard time doing that. And so we have an idea to potentially host a student edition of Swine Day. We did this starting last year with our Cattlemen's Day, where we were able to host a student edition that was adjacent to our adult edition or conventional edition of Cattlemen's Day. And so we're considering that for next year. But we have some questions about whether you think that would be supported. Obviously, we can't stick another 100 students into this room. And so just helping us prioritize if this is a move we should look at doing. If so, who should we be targeting? What types of programs? And so we're open to what your ideas are. And I'm going to be around this afternoon after Dr. Pullman's talk, and I'd be happy to visit with any of you about it. So should we offer the K-State Swine High School student program of some kind? And if so, how can we incorporate you? So how can we incorporate our producers and our vendors and you as future employers, understanding that we have some great young farm kids that are still coming to Manhattan and we need to continue to grow those numbers, but we also have a whole different type of student that's never been exposed to our industry before, and we have to help them understand the technology and sophistication that exists within this room. That's all I got.